So are you shocked that her media tour is not, at least so far, moving the numbers or quelling the panic on Team Blue?
I'm the opposite of shocked. And sometimes I think it's amazing how quickly and easily we forget even short-term memory. Let's remember that the last time she ran for president, when she actually had to campaign and debate and get votes and all of that, unlike this time, her campaign was such a disaster, such a debacle, despite every single institutional advantage, all that money from California, the stature of being a senator from California, the readiness of the media to heap adoration on her for potentially being the first ever woman of color to become president, et cetera, et cetera. Her campaign was such a disaster that she had to pull out and close her campaign before the first vote was even counted. Usually people say the campaign's not going well. Let's try and play our hand in Iowa and New Hampshire and then see. There was no point in doing that because she was such an awful politician. And then also, the entire 3.5 years that she was vice president, she was a complete national joke, an international joke, because every time she opened up her mouth, it turned into something incredibly embarrassing and cringeworthy. And I think a lot of us did forget that in what was some very well-engineered theater around the supposed excitement that people had when she emerged, got imposed by the Democratic Party elite on the party and in the country. And people kind of forgot just how inept and incompetent she is as a politician. Their obvious strategy was based on that. Let's keep her away from the media. Let's make sure she has very, very few unscripted moments. And the problem for them is that that wasn't working. They had to roll the dice. They had to send her out on her own. And even in the most loving, embracing, gentle arms that they sent her into, The View, Howard Stern, Stephen Colbert, doesn't get any more worshipful than that. She completely fell on her face, even in front of them. And I think people are starting to realize and remember who she really is.
Yes, that one exchange with Sonny Hostin, who's been advocating for Kamala Harris since the conversation first turned to, could we sub out Joe Biden? What would we do? Would we have an open primary? Could we get Michelle Obama instead? And she kept saying, we're not interchangeable as Black women. It has to be Kamala. She can do it. She loves Kamala Harris. And it was obviously not an attempt to trip up Kamala Harris, and yet tripped up she got, where Kamala Harris answered her question about how she's different from Joe Biden, whether she would have done anything differently. And as predicted, you'll see the version of it here that Trump made into an ad literally within 60 minutes of Kamala saying it. And now there are reports today that you can expect to see this ad everywhere from now to Election Day. Here it is.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
And Glenn, it's interesting because I'm sure they thought going to friendly outlets would protect her. But sometimes being in a friendly outlet can lead to your guard being down. And you don't realize, and I don't think Sonny Hostin realized either, when you're in danger.
I know, but Megyn, all that's completely true, and I agree with all of that. Nonetheless, I think it's worth noting how unbelievable and remarkable and confounding it is that she cannot answer that. It was like that question never occurred to her before. She didn't say, no, I think Biden did a great job. She didn't say, yeah. She said, you know what? Nothing that comes to mind, as though that question had never occurred to her to even think about. She's like, maybe I'll get back to you. I can think of it later. When you're running for president and you're the vice president of a very unpopular president on his road to losing, when the country believes that everything is on the wrong track, that all they want is change, the very first question that you have to be prepared to answer in her position is, how would you have been different than Joe Biden? Now, obviously, she can't just throw him under the bus and say, like, oh, everything he did was terrible. He was a terrible president. I intend to. But there's so many diplomatic ways that you answer that. 2020 is different than 2024. We have new challenges. We can do more of this, less of this. I think what happened is, this is what I really believe, is that Democratic elites really are so arrogant in terms of how non-Democratic voters think, how they process information. They really believed that they could win the election by just avoiding substance altogether. That was obviously their plan from the very beginning. And I don't think they ever really prepared her, and she's not prepared to talk about in any way what type of president she would be, because that never has been the strategy on which they were relying to win the race. It was all about these vibes, and I'm younger, and I'm different. I'm not these two old 80-year-old white guys that everyone's sick of. That gets you a little bit. That gets you a boost in the polls, like you said, that sugar high. But eventually, Americans, as dumb as Democrats think they are going to want to know, like, who is this person that we might make president? What does she believe? Where do we place her on the spectrum? What kinds of policies is she going to pursue? How is that going to affect our lives? And her inability and refusal to answer that comes from this condescension, I think, is what's really crippling her. And you saw that so clearly in all of these interviews where she got asked that question, she couldn't answer it. And now when she's like, I don't know. I never thought about that before. I'll get back to you right now. Nothing's coming to mind. That is stunning.
It's a nightmare for her team. I almost feel bad for them. So those answers, her general inaptitude as a politician, are what's keeping these numbers so low, among other things. I mean, the Biden policies were not a success, and she is associated with them. And it's leading to some open panic, and it's leading to some sound analysis of some bad numbers. I'm going to give you both. Here's James Carville with the on-camera equivalent of those headlines I just read you in the intro. Watch.
The only thing I feel is the election's coming November 5th. And I'm scared to death, and I'll get a time to, obviously.
You're not in a reflective mood.
Not in a particular reflective mood right now. I'm very, very concerned and very
What does
scared.
Harris need to do with the month left?
All right, 7 months left. Let's start. We got 26 days.
Yep.
Today is gone. You're going to lose 4 to the hurricane. They're doing all this and sitting down with 60 Minutes and sitting down with Colbert. I have a press conference. I get to ask the question.
You'd like to see her do more press conferences?
I'd like her to put more things in place. I would put President Obama out to make that. He's only got a 92% approval with Democrats. So I would have President Clinton going on these local TV stations talking about how tariffs are going to destroy the economy of Wisconsin or Michigan or anywhere else, because they have never worked. But we're just letting that go.
So is he wrong?
I mean, you have to give credit to the Clinton people like James Carville and those others, because they ran for president at a time when the Democrats were a disaster. They couldn't win an election. Going back to George McGovern, who got crushed by Nixon. The only one they won was Jimmy Carter because of post-Watergate anger at the Republicans. And then it was Reagan twice, George W. Bush the first time. And they did do a very good job of reinventing the party by focusing it not on these issues that alienate working class people or other people, but by realizing, as that old saying goes that they adopted, it's the economy, stupid. Like, all people care about is how are you going to materially improve our lives, which is what voters should care about. Think about this, even as two people, you and I, who cover politics every single day. What is a Kamala Harris policy on which she's running? Basically, what we know about her are 2 things. We know about what she thinks about abortion, which is she's in favor of it. And we know what she thinks about LGBT. She loves LGBTs very deeply. She loves us so much. She feels such a... other than that, what are her policies? The only ones that she's identified, she literally stole from Trump. Like, hey, let's not tax the tips of service workers. And every other policy that we've heard from basically is nothing other than everything I said I believed in 2019, single-payer healthcare, ban on fracking, mandatory buyback of guns, are things I no longer now believe with no explanation. So if you are going to present a candidate who has no ideas, no ideology, no platform to even try and convince people that you're going to improve their lives, let alone to persuade them that you're going to, how do you expect to win an election? I think what James Carville is saying there is true, which is she should stop talking about all of these kind of cultural issues, these ancillary issues, relying on these very vague pronouncements about who she is and isn't, and just go to those swing states and talk about the effects of the election on those people's economic lives, because that's ultimately what people vote on, despite how dumb Democrats think they are.
She's outlined a few economic proposals, and to their credit, it's come up in a couple of interviews, the Stephanie Ruhle one and the 60 Minutes one. How are you going to pay for it? You can't give all these goodies to the American public without paying for them. That's just not the way the system works. You don't control money. You don't control tax policy as president. You need to work with Congress. And both times she's been caught flat-footed. She has no plan for if she can't get Congress to go along with these pie-in-the-sky tax proposals. And she is not likely to win both houses of Congress. If you look at the latest numbers. And by the way, Americans like divided government in general. So I would predict that if she wins the White House, there'd be a higher likelihood that there'd be split tickets where people would say, well, we're not going to give Democrats full control. She has no plan. If she doesn't get full control of Congress, she has no tax plan. She has no economic plan at all. That's been made clear. And even the one she's proposing help allegedly very small groups of people, like her $25,000 tax help for first-time home buyers. Okay, if you're a first-time home buyer, maybe, but probably not, because as Trump's been pointing out, it's just going to drive the price of housing up for everyone in the market, including the first-time home buyers. You know, I mean, that's how we got into the college tuition mess. Every time they kept increasing the amount of loans you could get from the federal government, the college tuitions just went up that amount of loans. And so those of us who used loans and those of us who didn't all had to pay a higher bill. Imagine waking up one day to find out your home no longer belongs to you. Someone somewhere has stolen it. They've stolen your property right out from under you. It sounds unthinkable, but it is a sad reality for some American homeowners and a risk for anyone that owns property. It's called house stealing. That's what the FBI says. It's a form of real estate fraud where scammers leverage loopholes in the system to fraudulently transfer your home's title into their name, then take out loans against your property, or even sell it behind your back. By the time you find out, the scammer's long gone, leaving you, the legitimate homeowner, to clean up the mess. But right now, triple lock protection is available through HometitleLock.com, offering 24/7 title monitoring, alerts, and restoration services. You can sign up today at HometitleLock.com and use the promo code Megyn for 30 days of protection for free and a comprehensive title scan to make sure you're not already a victim. That's promo code Megyn and HometitleLock.com by using the link below. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.